let's talk about the heroic trilogy then. We'll just briefly list the titles: Valley of Red Shadows, which is the hero. Then there's the Super Seven, the anti-hero, and then the Egg of the Show, the superhero. Uh, we'll talk about Valley of Red Shadows, a title of which you have admitted that you hated.
I don't like the end of the book, and I don't like the title, but they serve and they're good for the thing. With like we were just mentioning Bergman. I'm not a fan of Bergman emotionally, his stuff, but I'd have to admit he's a great artist, and what works, whether I like it or not, even my own stuff.
You once wrote in a review of Shea the idea of mythic realism, and this is sort of what I got from Valley of Red Shadows. I don't want to go into detail with this book unless you want to recapitulate sections of it, but just basically speaking about some of the things involved. I mean, this is a Western in which all of a sudden animals can talk and they have great philosophical discussions. I want you to talk about that, kind of creating that landscape that they have. It reminds me of a Sergio Leone film, but for literature and not for film.
Well, I don't think there's any section where the animals talk other than in the myths that the people are talking, the stories that they're telling themselves. Basically, it's a story about a guy named Elias Walker, and this Walker was first mentioned in a Norwegian in the Family in the backstory of the super spy character who's the hero of the second book. And so they're related to the George Bush clan, the Bush Walker clan, who produced 2 presidents here in the United States. And it's a mythic. It's not. They're not real ancestors, but they're vaguely related to the ancestors of them. So anyway, so this guy is basically a guy who loses his job on a ranch. He goes wandering around Texas of 1850, just a few years as a state of the United States. He goes to the Gulf of Mexico. There he meets the legendary Pecos Bill. We don't really see Pecos Bill there. We just hear stories of what he did with Pecos Bill on a trawler or something, getting shrimp. By the time he gets back to shore, Pecos Bill has left, and apparently Pecos Bill is always a couple of steps ahead of Elias Walker, sort of brooding the legend of Elias Walker, so that wherever Walker goes, there seems to be someone who has heard of him and positive things of him. And of all the characters I've ever written, this Elias Walker, the first Elias Walker, seems to just stumble into success of some sort. He meets people along the way. He gets offered a job to track down this young girl who is actually, in a Norwegian in the Family, the old woman who is the torment of the young Paulie Maravelli. And as this young girl, she has been captured by Indians, which is a hearkening back to the story of Quanah Parker, the Indian chief in Texas. I forget which band. His mother, I forget her name, Ann Parker, was it maybe, had been captured and spent like 10 or 12 years, was raped by the Indians and gave birth to Quanah Parker. So that sets the temple. That goes, there was a famous poem cycle by John G. Neihart, an American poet from Nebraska, about that. And so he
Blackout Speaks, or is that his?
Yeah, Blackout Speaks, John G. Neihart. And basically the story has them traipsing about Texas. It's sort of a mythic Texas of 1850. There are place names that are no longer. They go through places that seem to be kind of mythic. They go through. They meet a town where there's nothing but women, bunch of Amazons, and then just as they're about to give up, the young girl just happens to just run into their camp. They collect the money. They have a series of run-ins with bad guys. A few of their members get killed off. There's a black guy. There's a cook who's an antecedent character of a cranky character from some short stories that I had done, and so it's basically like you said, Leone-esque in a sense, but I would say
richer characterization though. They're not this kind of gods above everyone else, whereas this one is a fully developed character.
Yeah, and the main character, there are dramatic. I mean, the first book is deconstructing the idea of a hero, and this guy who's supposedly the hero is basically a hero because everyone calls him a hero.
That's a very ironic title.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he does nothing particularly special, and in the end, we get the book turns away from him even really, because we find out in the end that this might be all being told by the young girl as she's grown up in the last seconds of her life before she's killed by Paulie Maravelli. So I wanted to tie that back in there, and it probably would come as a bit of an abrupt shock to readers who hadn't read anything else of mine. But by the same token, it has that waking up from a dream or a nightmare kind of feel, and then we go back to the ending that I don't particularly like aesthetically, but it's the only ending that really works to have that kind of folksy Western ending that you know, that.
What do you think of the employment of the fugal sections, i.e., the colored sections that you use, where all of a sudden a new voice will kind of pop out? You use that later just in skimming the edge of the show. I've noticed sections of those colored sections are reused for different purposes in the edge of the show.
Yeah, that's something that actually I did. I think I had a book many years ago. I played with that first called The Trial of Horacio Guzman, which is about this pedophile who reads a science fiction book and tries to justify his raping of little boys with, or possible raping of little boys with sex with robots. So that's the book that I think I first started doing something like that in. But you know, you try to do the different things that. I'm just looking at some of the titles here. Like, I do have a lot of very Aesopian kind of chapter titles. Like, I've got, let's see, The God-Fears and the Girl, Who the Fuck is Duan Zelkanovi, which is a kid who got onto my Cosmoetica E-list for some reason, but I just liked the name so much I had to use it. Then I have things like Life's Supreme Loneliness, The Town with No Name, The Land of Sharp Rocks, The Land of the Big Flowers, The Land of the Singing Cacti, The Great American Desert. These are very also Paul Bunyan-esque titles, and Paul Bunyan makes a small cameo appearance in the book as well.
It's an interesting book, too, in that it's probably the most comedic book in your corpus.
Yeah, I mean, it's
straight comedy.
Yeah, A Norwegian in the Family is a dark comedy, but there the term comedy isn't so. I mean, there's a lot of funny things in A Norwegian in the Family, especially with Bit-Run Rheingold and Paulie and his Goombas. But this book is most definitely a comedy, because when you think about it, to me, heroism is, I think, inherently kind of a silly concept. I mean, if you run into a burning building and you risk something, you can be a hero. In order to be a hero, you have to risk losing something. In this book, there's really not much risk. There's really not. I mean, yes, there are bullets that fly by some of these guys, and they build a kind of awkward camaraderie throughout the book. But you know, it's it basically, in a sense, is sort of like the Texas Odyssey in a way. It's not patterned after the Odyssey. It's not like Ulysses that's patterned after anything. But it certainly has that feel that you could imagine that if a bunch of old Greeks were around Texas in the mid-19th century, this is the kind of thing they would sing of.
You answered my own question too when you spoke of how the animals can talk and that they're used in fables. And I wanted to mention that briefly. The fables are so extended that if the reader were to just open the book up at random and take that section in, they would think that this is what the book was about. In the sense that your work is kind of like, if it's not like a microscope, it has to be fully seen in all its glory in order to understand all of it. And those sections are very rich and kind of supernatural in a way, that they can stand on their own outside of whatever context they're in.
Well, there are three types of fables that I used. One was the Pecos Bill / Paul Bunyan type fables, where I just looked up online. I have a books on Paul Bunyan and Pecos Bill. I looked up some things there. I looked some stuff online, and I sort of redid and expanded some of the Pecos Bill incidents. The second one was sort of generic Old West / Texas legends and whatnot. Uh, Probably the one that sticks in my mind is the one about the snake and the farmer, and the farmer pulls a rock off of the rattlesnake, and the snake says he has to bite him because that's what snakes do, and then a coyote has to basically settle their dispute. And then the third one is just stuff I made up. So it's about a third. If I have 25, 30 of those fables in there, it's about an even split of about a third, and a third. Pecos Bill, Old West Texas, and then made up fables.
I also wanted to speak to you in terms of overlooked works. This would probably be one of them if we look into the posterity. You have mentioned that you think that this book in your heroic trilogy will be overlooked in coming readership, but I wanted to speak to you on that because it's not as if some of these works, even if they're lesser as compared to the Super 7 or the Edge of the Shown, do not have their own merits. Moby Dick is a good example in that its skeletal structures in Omo and Type D still have quite a bit of merit to them by themselves, yet they are often overlooked, not even read, in comparison to the great masterpiece that Herman Melville created. Speak to me a little bit of that. Do you think that the idea, too, of great audiences, the Whitmanian ideal, is kind of romanticized in that future decades will probably be reading these works, but only be reading the top percentage and most quoted of the books rather than some of these more overlooked gems?
That's the way it is. One of my favorite poems, and I think one of the best poems by Robinson Jeffers, is The House Dog's Grave. But because it's about the death of a pet, and it has true sentiment, not sentimentality, but true sentiment, it's a great poem, but it's not the classic Robinson Jeffers hurt hawks, the blood jags from the edge, the fire dawn, there isn't that Sturm und Drang of a woman getting, having sex with a horse, like in Roan Stallion. So inevitably that sort of gets lost. Probably the best example in my own work that I think is a great book that's probably going to always get lost is a book called The Scorpion Swam. So, so I think
we're talking about Robinson Jeffers.
Yeah, Robinson Jeffers
and The Scorpion Swam.
Yeah, and that's going to get probably overlooked, but there will always be people. I mean, if you look at John Steinbeck's a good example. He probably, more than any other writer, has the most interesting and largest number of good books. Things like Cannery Row get overlooked in favor of The Pearl or East of Eden or Grapes of Wrath or Of Mice and Men. That's just the way it is, because people, even the deepest people have a short attention span. One of the things I do think, and one of the reasons, and I've said this to people before, is that I think that long books and longer works, I think people think that the attention span of people is always going to get smaller. And I think for the next few decades that's probably true. But I think once people start merging with machines and people get, for example, start getting implants where they can sort of offload books or whatnot, and who knows what, in the next 50 or 100 years, I think people are going to be, their literacy rate is going to actually go up. They're going to be reading stuff, and they're going to be wanting to read things far longer than now. So I think most books that are in this prescribed 70 to 100,000 word range now are going to look like short stories, and I'm just not going to hold the interest of people who want to dive more deeply into things. So books that are 500,000 words or more are going to hold people's interest, richer, deeper things. And so I think readership is going to get better. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think so.